Okay, so today we're talking about an aircraft that was, let's be honest, kind of slow, a little awkward, and definitely overlooked. But it played an absolutely critical role in winning World War II. This is the story of the PPY Catalina. Think about the year 1935. It was, just an incredible time for aviation. It gave us absolute legends like the B-17 Flying Fortress and the C-47 Skytrain. We all know their stories. But that very same year, a third, equally important aircraft took flight, the consolidated PBY Catalina. And for whatever reason, its story just doesn't cast that same huge shadow in the history books. And maybe part of the reason is, well, just look at it. It didn't have that aggressive look of a B-17. It wasn't exactly graceful. In fact, its crews gave it this nickname, the pig boat. It sounds unflattering, but it was said with affection, you know? It wasn't pretty, but it was tough, and every single line on it just screamed purpose. So, what made this so-called pig boat so special then? Let's dig into the brilliant and kind of unconventional design choices that turned this awkward-looking plane into a true engineering marvel. The PBY's genius was really hiding in plain sight. You see that high wing? It wasn't just sitting there. It was way up on a pylon to keep the engines and props high above all that corrosive sea spray. And those floats on the wingtips? They cleverly folded up to become the actual wingtips in flight, which really cleaned up the aerodynamics. But the real secret sauce was that enormous, flat wing. It was just packed with fuel, giving the Catalina an incredible range and endurance that pretty much nothing else could touch at the time. And here's where things get really clever. One of its most revolutionary features was something called the wet wing. Now, the Catalina was the first production airplane to actually use this design. It means the wing's own structure is the fuel tank. There are no separate bladders inside. You had to seal every single rivet and seam, but the payoff? It was huge. It saved 875 pounds of weight, and that's weight you can use for more fuel, more bombs, or, as we'll see, a lot more rescued sailors. But it wasn't perfect right out of the gate. Not at all. Early versions had some serious issues. If you landed too hard in rough water, you could literally wrinkle the hull. Pilots complained that the controls were just brutally heavy to handle, and crews were constantly dealing with popped rivets. Sometimes they just plugged the holes with pencils to keep flying. It was a tough plane, for sure, but man, it demanded tough crews. So despite those early growing pains, the Catalina, the Cat as it came to be known, well, it proved its worth in a big way once the war started. This rugged workhorse became absolutely indispensable. The thing about the PBY is that it always seemed to be in the right place at the most critical time. In May of '41, it was a Catalina that found the German battleship Bismarck after it had slipped away into the Atlantic, which let the Royal Navy close in for the kill. On December 7th, a PBY crew dropped the very first American bombs of the war. And then, in June '42, a PBY spotted the Japanese fleet racing towards Midway, giving the U.S. Navy the critical warning it needed to set an ambush and win the biggest naval battle of the Pacific. It was the eye in the sky right when it mattered most. And it wasn't just a spotter plane. For an aircraft that just cruised along at a little over 100 miles an hour, it became a surprisingly deadly submarine hunter. U.S. Navy PBIs were credited with sinking 25 Axis submarines. Now, to put that into perspective, that's a huge chunk of the Navy's total subkills during the entire war. The slow-flying Cat became a U-boat's worst nightmare. But the story gets even more dramatic. Over in the Pacific, some PBYs took on this whole new, kind of menacing identity. They flew these incredibly dangerous missions under the cover of darkness. They became known as the Black Cats. Painted flat black to disappear into the night sky, these planes flew these grueling, long-range bombing and mine-laying missions, sometimes ranging as far as the coast of China. And get this, when they ran out of actual bombs, the crews would sometimes drop beer bottles with razor blades stuck in the necks. As the bottles fell, they'd create this terrifying, eerie whistle. It was pure psychological warfare on the enemy troops below. Wild, right? As impressive as all that is, you could make a very strong case that the PBY's greatest legacy, its most impactful mission, was its role as a rescuer. This is where the slow, sturdy flying boat truly became a guardian angel. The story of Lieutenant Nathan Gordon is just the ultimate example of this. Picture it. He's under heavy enemy fire, and he lands his PBY in rough seas, not once, not twice, but 3 separate times to rescue the crews of downed bombers. He finally took off, incredibly overloaded, with 25 extra men crammed inside his plane. For that, he became the only PBY pilot to ever receive the Medal of Honor. Just incredible bravery. And Gordon's mission, as incredible as it was, wasn't some kind of one-off fluke. These planes were constantly pushed to their absolute limits. Take this record breaker. A single Australian Catalina rescued 87, that's 87, Dutch sailors from a sunken freighter. We're talking over 15,000 pounds of people alone, pushing the aircraft way, way beyond any design safety limit. It's honestly a miracle it ever got off the water. Which all led to this kind of unofficial rule among Catalina crews. If the payload hadn't yet sunk the boat, it would somehow take off. I mean, that just perfectly captures the rugged, can-do spirit of both the plane and the people who flew it. It was, as they said, hell first up. So when the war finally ended, you might think the Catalina's story was over. But nope. Not even close. This tough old bird embarked on a surprisingly long and really varied second act in its civilian life. Its post-war career was just all over the map. I mean, a lot of people know about Jacques Cousteau's ship, the Calypso, but he also had a PBY as his research plane. The airline Qantas used them for these insane, record-setting passenger flights that stayed in the air for over 32 hours straight. Some were even converted into these luxurious flying yachts for the super rich. And right up into the 21st century, they were still earning their keep as rugged water bombers, fighting forest fires all over the world. So in the end, how many of these things were actually built? A staggering 3,305. And that number makes the PBY the most produced flying boat or amphibian in the history of aviation. And just so we're clear, a flying boat lands on its hull in the water, while an amphibian has wheels to land on a runway too. The Catalina mastered both, which is just a testament to its brilliant and incredibly enduring design. And that brings us to one last big question. The PBY was a really unique solution to a unique set of problems, right? It was slow, but it had incredible range and was just tough as nails, perfect for a war fought over vast oceans. But with the way technology has gone, with satellites and jets and everything else, it really makes you wonder, will we ever see its like again?